you're alone, but you're not really alone because you're part of the Camino community and the pilgrim community that's traveling with you. So other pilgrims are there, and in my experience, people are so open on the Camino to talk, to build that community. It's one of the things that makes the Camino so unique, I think.
The Camino was a long time discussion with my...
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Camino Talks. This is Umberto from Follow the Camino, and today I'm delighted to welcome Gemma Brierley from Camino Guys. How are you today, Gemma?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to speak to you today.
Great. Gemma, so you are running the famous Camino Guides, which, I don't know, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pilgrims use every year. Do you mind introducing yourself to tell us a bit about you and how you got into this?
Of course. So, as my surname might give you the clue, I'm a Brierley. I'm the daughter of John Brierley, who originally wrote the Camino guidebooks that I now update. So for myself, I was aware of the Caminos from quite a young age, watching my dad walk and talk about his trips. And then long before I ever thought I would get involved working with him on the guides, I left school and went traveling, and as part of that period I walked the Camino myself and just fell in love with it, and then didn't really ever decide that this would be what I would end up doing, but I just couldn't quite leave it alone. So I began helping my dad a little bit here and there, helping him with updates, with more of the photography side or the design side, and it just grew and grew until here I am all these years later now, spending most of my time keeping the guides that we have up to date since my father passed away. So yeah.
Very good. Yeah. And it's great that you got into it, I suppose, quite slowly, and because it is a massive project that your dad started 20 years ago or something like that, no?
Yeah. Yes, I think the first guide was printed in 2003, but it took quite a few years to get to that point. He started writing it long before that. So yeah.
Very good. And can you tell us about the Camino guides, and what is it? And people use it for a couple of routes, so some routes of the Camino?
Yeah, so we have guides for the Camino Francés, the Camino Portugués, and then also for the Camino Finisterre and the Camino Inglés. And at the moment, people often ask if we could expand that to more routes. At the moment, that's all I can manage to maintain. But yeah, so a few of the routes, and yeah.
So just for our audience, so the Camino guide is the what we would recognize as the best guide on the Camino, with some route descriptions, some of the maps, and so that's one of the main things. I think your dad was a surveyor, so quite detail orientated.
Very detail orientated, yeah. I guess what my dad did quite differently originally. I mean, there are many fantastic guides out there. I think what makes ours a little bit different is the maps that my dad initially created and that we still use were designed. I mean, we grew up hiking and we were all raised reading maps, but we're aware that that's not true for everybody. And so my dad's idea was to try and make maps that were really open to everybody. You don't need to be able to read a map or be really confident in navigation to understand our maps. You walk. It was, I mean, a long time ago in the early days of GPS, but it's more like that. You walk, you follow from the bottom of the page to the top of the page. What will be on your left is drawn on your left, and they're maps, but they're really pictorial representations of the route that you're walking, with the idea that everyone, whether you're an experienced hiker and a veteran pilgrim or someone new, can really find your way easily to try and make the Camino really accessible. Because back when the first guide was published, waymarking on the route was very different. The infrastructure was quite different. Now I think it would be quite hard to get lost with the amount of really quality waymarking, but way back 20 years ago it was a bit of a different story. So that's one thing I think that makes it quite different, is the maps are quite unique and very accessible. But the other key thing and what is spoken about, I think, most when people think about Brierley guides would be the combination of that and the fact that our guides really openly acknowledge that the Camino, that pilgrimage, is a journey that happens on two levels. There's the outer journey, the path that our feet plod, and the inner journey. And this means something different to everybody that you ask. But for us, it's a really an overt acknowledgement that a pilgrimage has this other element to it. And so we include space for reflections, for thinking about your own journaling and your own inner journey as a really core part of our guide. We try to make it, and my dad dubbed them a practical and mystical manual, with the idea that they can support you on both journeys. So I would say that's the thing that really sets them apart.
In a way, you're bringing the pilgrim into the guidebook by adding these spiritual touches and journey and hits along the way, something like that.
I love the way you word that. No one's ever phrased it like that. But yes, there's a lot of blank space for people to journal and write their own reflections. And I love that idea of, it's your guide for you to make what you will.
And I think some of the cool stuff is also you've worked a lot on showing on the map the variants as well, from A to B. A lot of the time people want to do the real Camino, and it's like, hold on a second, it depends how fast you want to go from A to B,
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can stop along the way more or less, but you can also take a more scenic route. And what is really cool on the maps, because it's the most visual part, is the color differences between a scenic route and a more direct route alongside the road, etc. Now it's easier for us to take the scenic route because we've got more. Well, I don't know if we've got more time, but we've got more better equipment. In medieval time, I'd say people wanted to go from A to B as quickly as possible to get shelter, to get food.
I love sometimes people worry about bridges. They say, I don't want to take a bridge. I want the original route a medieval pilgrim would have taken. And sometimes I laugh and think, if the bridge had been there, I think people would have taken it. They would have begged for a bridge.
True. So I suppose it's very funny how the work that you do is a bridge between an image we have of a pilgrimage, an ancient things, old bridges, I don't know, rain, dirt, etc., and the practicality of it, whereby by following the routes you do, people know when they can have food or a toilet break along the way, which is very important, I suppose. And this is something as well that you update and makes it very easy. I remember I've used the guides to give distances to our clients between places, and one of the challenges I found, people would come back and say, well, the walk is not 21 kilometers, it's 22 and a half. I'm like, no, it's 21. The guidebook says that. After comparing different guidebooks, I noticed that your guidebook, for example, go from hostel to hostel, so which is a cut of the world. So when you're saying that the guidebook is there to help the pilgrim in their journey, it's because there is not one Camino, there is a multitude of them. And same thing, and the issue with a 1.5 kilometer difference, if that's at the start of the day, or if that's all you do during the day, it's not too bad. But when people have walked 20, 28,
Oh,
29 kilometers, the extra bit is like, oh.
Yeah, well, that was another, my father in the early days of his walking, you said he liked detail. He was a surveyor, very precise, and like you say, people might say, oh, what's a kilometer here and there, but with a heavy bag after a long day, and I think often when people will say, oh, it's 20 kilometers to this town, but where in that town? It can be 5 kilometers across the town, and if the hostel you're aiming for is on the far side, that can make a big difference. So yeah, trying to make that really clear and really visually apparent, I think, is something we've worked really hard to do. So people aren't stung with an extra 2 kilometers when they are ready to rest.
And do you get some? Could you tell us about some feedback you get from some of the readers, some of the useful, and maybe some of the less useful, and maybe a bit comical?
Well, one thing, my dad always put his email address in the guidebooks and really welcomed feedback, but also just people's questions. And I have to say, it was one of his favorite parts of this work, and it's one of mine as well, is the messages that we share with people and the stories that people come and tell us about their experience on the route and these transformational experiences they had, or maybe they're really nervous before starting and they have, questions and need a bit of encouragement, and then hearing they've had this incredible experiences, having that like open discussion with other pilgrims is really special. So we get a lot of that, and it is really special. Comical one that we ended up adding a note many years ago of that used to make us laugh was sometimes people would query the distance, but only ever for the end of the day. They'd say it can't have been right. It felt so much longer. No one ever had questions about the start of the day, but at the end, when legs are tired, that 1 kilometer can feel like 10. But it was all recorded on GPS. I was afraid to say it really was 1 kilometer. It just felt long. At the end of the day, can change.
That's a good one. We've had as well sometimes people with step counters when they have a watch which is not GPS driven. Like these are very misleading. I'm curious about something. The Camino changes. The Camino is a living trail. Sometimes there's a flooding, and so the path changes. How do you handle this then? Knowing that I'm sure if something happens last week or next week, the print is already out. How do you handle these?
It took me a while to become comfortable with that with a printed book, the second you print it, you risk something changing, and you're really attached to giving people the best guide that you can. But what my dad really helped me to see was also that the Camino itself is incredible, and like you say, it's an evolving thing, a living route, and it's amazing how the Camino responds, and especially now the infrastructure is so incredible that if something happens and there's a flooding, even when I first walked nearly 20 years ago, pilgrims would come together and work it out together, or people would tell you, or the hospitaliers would let you know. Or now I've walked recently, and temporary signage is amazing to help people find their way. But I think for me, that's where the community element of the Camino is so incredible, is you are part of this moving village of people walking. So even if something like a flooded path happens, you're rarely navigating that on your own. There's a lot of people that will be going through that experience with you, and often it's those experiences that end up being a real highlight when people think back on their journey.
Thinking that you're not alone, and that there is some community that you don't know. Actually, it was yesterday, it was last week, or tomorrow, that helps each other. And one place where I don't know if you've seen that several times, but there is I think it's entering Arcade, or someplace on the Portuguese way, where when I did the Camino first in 2008, we were going along the main Camino alongside a car manufacturing storage place. You probably know the most boring 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers of the guidebook.
It's character building.
Yeah, and then they have actually created, well, when I went back, a little road alongside the river on the left hand side, or maybe it's entering Pontevedra, I think, or something like this, Arcadia Pontevedra. And I've noticed how the guy at the end of the industrial estate was fighting with the arrows. You could see an overlaying. Have you seen that spot where you've got arrows, and it's no longer one arrow, but it's 5 arrows side by side, and then they're painted in black.
Yeah, and that I think is where it's really helpful to have a guidebook. Like, it is very possible to walk the Camino without a guidebook. There's the waymarking is amazing, but that is a really good example of where it's helpful. So you can look at the map and all these crisscrossing arrows, and we mentioned the crisscrossing arrows, but you can then, like you say, we try to show all the route variations, so then it can become less confusing or daunting when you see multiple arrows if you can look at a page and see what they mean and where they go. There's certainly a section into Pontevedra, the same, beautiful along the river, I think maybe is what you're thinking about.
And myself, I feel for the guy with the bar there, because somehow the arrow going by the river is much nicer, but he's losing customers. So it's like, I actually feel so much for him, because I had forgot my walking stick there, and he ran after me to give it back to me back then. So it's a bit.
But it's like you mentioned earlier, there's so many options. For, like, some people really need a bar at that point. They need a coffee or a cold drink, and then that's an option. And actually, I think that's part of what makes the Camino so special, is that, yes, there is this one, whichever route you're on, there is this one great general path and direction towards this incredible destination. But actually, we can pick and choose the Camino that we are most comfortable with. Some people are less comfortable to follow a green, less walked path along the river, and then they have the option not to. And I think there's something for everyone.
And I think sometimes people, you have to match the expectations. But what I like about your guidebook and most guidebooks, that people have to take them as a toolkit and not a single source of truth. In the sense that, as we said, things change, and also people need to make their own journey. Maybe I'll take this option because it's a wetter day, and I'd rather go on alongside a road, but get to my hotel or to my albergue as quickly as possible. So there is this sense of empowerment, which I hope people understand. I'm just saying that because sometimes, when people are seeking this life transformative journey, while the Camino can be that, it is not a guarantee. Similarly, when you're offering the mapping, the guidebook, or any service or help, some people, maybe they'll get blisters after 2 days for whatever reason, and suddenly, as you said, the last kilometer will become horrible. Have you? On the transformative side, what's your take on that? And maybe you can talk to us about how the Camino has changed between, the early days of the revival of the Camino, early 2000s, what your dad would have walked and somehow then participate to make popular, and today.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's two big questions, I guess. For the transformational element, I think, listening to what you say, and you talk about, blisters and challenging experiences and trudging along the side of car manufacturers and in industrial estates. And actually, I think something big that really impacts that is the intention that we have. And a journey of transformation isn't always going to be beautiful, or sometimes it's the challenge and those really difficult moments that prove to be the things that were the most transformational for us. You spoke about how empowering it is to take something like a toolkit, like a guide with advice, but then make your own decisions and have your own experience. And I think for a lot of people, that is really transformational, to realize that we live in a world where we often believe we are dependent on so many things, and that so many things are necessary for us to be okay and to be happy, and how empowering it is to carry everything that you need on your back and just walk. And it can be incredibly simplifying as an experience to realize that you can manage through those challenges, those days you weren't sure you'd make it to your hostel, you didn't know if you'd find your way or if you would manage, and actually how empowering that can feel at the end of the day. So I think that sometimes those hard moments are what make it such an incredible experience for people. The high of realizing you managed that and getting through those can be incredible. And that's been the same. I think so much about the Camino has changed over the years, as you have seen and know well. So much has changed and evolved, but that's still the same. You know, we still get blisters. Rain still come. You know, a lot of that is the same and hasn't changed. Even over the years, it really has.
I think one thing that we do at Follow the Camino, obviously we organize the pilgrimage for people, and you know, it's the whole thing between peregrinos and torigrinos. And when I walk or I guide groups, you know, we get the odd comments, oh, that's not the real pilgrimage. And you're like, hold on, why not? Well, because you're getting a booking. So look, everybody has their own Everest. And for some people, 300 meters hill. I've had clients like this. We're not climbing that mountains. That's not the mountain. That's a small hill. But if for them that's a challenge, so I suppose, what do you make of the pilgrimage, and or what's your pilgrimage style, or what's your walking style, and then how do you like doing this, and why it is important for you to do it like this?
Well, the way that I walk and my pilgrimage style is one thing, and what's right for other people will be individual. And I completely agree with you. I'm not here to judge anybody else's pilgrimage or anybody else's experience. We all need to find what's right for us and works for us. And like you say, one person's hill will be another person's mountain, and we don't know anybody's story or experience, and what we need is a really individual thing. And if some people need the support of a company to feel the confidence to make this journey, then good for them, and it's fantastic that those things are available. Some people need to have their bags carried to make it possible, and how wonderful that they now are able to have an experience of pilgrimage. So what's right for one person won't be right for another. I can and enjoy and love the act of simplifying, and my bag down to as light as I can get it, so that I feel the liberation of how little I need. But that's my experience, and for me that's how I like to walk. But everybody will have their own needs and their own journey, and that doesn't make it any better or worse.
No. But I suppose if you were out walking from a young age, it helps as well. I know that ourselves, most of our clients, it's the first time they're going to walk for one day for 5-6 hours, never mind 5-6 days in a row. You know, it's such an unnatural thing to do nowadays. But you know, I've seen people with who just had a heart surgery and so on, walking slowly, and it was great to see them walking lightly with some reassurance, because you cannot have the heavy load on everything. I wanted to ask you, what's your take on the on walking the Camino for individual people, and maybe female especially? That's a question which we get asked quite regularly.
Yeah, well, I get asked that question too, and my answer is, you know, not conclusive, but I can speak from my experience, which is that for me, I find the Camino a wonderful place where I feel really safe and empowered to travel as a woman on my own. And I think what's incredible about the Camino is you can walk on your own, but you're never really alone on the Camino. If you want to be solo and have contemplative time, you can have that, but there is this community, this village of pilgrims. We all have different paces of walking, but there's only so fast a human can walk. So there tends to be, in my experience, this sort of moving band of people that journeys sort of together, sort of apart, but it's this community that's there if you want it. And especially there are quieter routes and, you know, quieter times of year, but it is incredibly easy to find a Camino where you can walk and always have, you know, other pilgrims that you have seen throughout the day. They're in sight. You stop for a coffee and more people will walk through. So you're alone, but you're not really alone because you're part of the Camino community and the pilgrim community that's traveling with you. So other pilgrims are there. And in my experience, people are so open on the Camino to talk, to build that community. It's one of the things that makes the Camino so unique, I think. So for me, I think it's an incredible opportunity to travel as a woman on your own and not on your own.
And I think what we tell people, what I like to the way I like to phrase it is to behave as if you were going out to the restaurant on your own or to a bar on your own. You know, you have to be as careful as that. You know, it's not to do silly stuff and go to the most remote place on your own, or to walk with a group of 3 people that you've met the previous 2 days, or to walk with them, you know, for that stretch or for the whole next 5 days or 30 days. So it's to get that that common sense. But I would agree with you. Like, you know, it's more common sense than anything else, you know.
Absolutely. And knowing that there are people there, if you feel uncomfortable on a certain isolated stretch, I've never struggled to find people, you know, if I've never come across someone who said they were feeling uncomfortable and could they walk with me, and not welcomed them alongside me if they felt like they needed that to feel safe. Like you can reach out, and we all know common, you know, we've had to learn, most of us women who travel on our own have had to learn, you know, common sense. But like you say, there's also a beautiful community out there, and we have to be sensible.
No, that's great. That's great. That's great. I suppose for you the Camino, now that you have to update the few routes that you are working on the guidebook, are you tempted sometimes to do another route, but you can't because you have to update the guidebooks, or do you sometimes just skip to go walking somewhere else that I don't know, other field maybe?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've walked other routes that we don't have guidebooks for, and other routes. My dad walked every route he could find. I haven't walked every single way back to Camino. It would be quite an undertaking, but yeah, I mean, I love the Camino, and I don't only walk to update. And sometimes walking for the joy of exploring another route turns into a guide. Our most recent addition to our guidebook family was the Camino Inglés, which I just wanted to explore. The Celtic links were really exciting to me, and then that did become a guidebook. So generally, I'm found on the routes now that we have the guides too, because it's really important to me to keep the guides fresh and up to date, and to really see with my own eyes. Although my husband also helps me now, he does some sections for me. But to see what's changing, how it's evolving. So that's usually where I'm found, but I've certainly explored other routes over the years.
Great stuff. Gemma, we're coming to the end of this chat. It was lovely to talk to you. I don't know if you have any anything you would like to mention to people who've never walked the Camino, or something, I don't know, they need to keep in mind before making the decision, or which route or whatever. Not sure.
I guess to circle back to our point of there's no one Camino, there's no one way to walk the Camino. So I guess if anybody has something that has inspired them to explore and walk the Camino, but thinks that's not for me, don't rule it out yet. Explore it. There's a Camino out there for everyone. There's, whether you're nervous because you think it's too big an adventure and undertaking, or whether you're worried that with the increase in numbers, it's too busy and popular and touristy. There's Camino out there for everyone. You can find quiet on the paths and company on the paths. So yeah,
that's great.
You can find your own way.
Very good. Well, Gemma, thank you very much for your time today, and it was lovely to talk to you. And good luck with all of the walks and the Camino guides. Thank you.
Thank you. It was lovely to speak to you. Thank you for having me.